Welcome to Roofing Road Trips, the podcast that takes you on a thrilling journey across the world of roofing. From fascinating interviews with roofing experts to on-the-road adventures, we'll uncover the stories, innovations, and challenges that shape the rooftops over our heads. So fasten your seatbelts and join us as we embark on this exciting roofing road trip. Hello, everyone. My name's Megan Ellsworth here at rooferscoffeeshop.com, and you are listening to a roofing road trip. I'm so excited. Today, we're talking with Dean Curtis from Ingage. Hi, friend. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to talk about Ingage and when to chat, text, or email, all the different things with all the different generations coming up into the workforce. So let's get started just by you telling us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. This is, I think, my second time on the podcast, so I appreciate you
Yes.
having me on again.
Yeah.
It's great to be back with you. So I've been at Engage coming up on 8 years now. It's kind of crazy to think
Wow.
it's been that long. My tech journey, believe it or not, my first job was as a classroom teacher. And then I got into tech by way of a big company, Oracle, went to Palm, went to spend some time at Apple. And I was
Wow.
looking for a place to go to, really try my hand at a startup and something much smaller. So here, 8 years later, we have, tackled the home improvement industry with Engage. So it's been a great journey.
Wow. Amazing. That's
Yeah.
incredible. Apple. Those are some big names you mentioned. Oracle. um so can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing around communication struggles with the four very different generations in the workforce currently?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're a team of just about 40 people here at Engage, and you wouldn't think with just that few people there would be the gaps, but it's pretty amazing when you see. So I'm 53 years old, right? So I default to certain things, and then the newer team members that we have on, and then we've had interns on as well who are still in college. It is pretty crazy to see, right?
Yeah.
First and foremost, everybody has tech and platform preferences, right?
Yes.
Whereas I might have defaulted to email, maybe other people are defaulting to Slack, right? So each generation has its preferred tech and way of communicating. And sometimes this can cause friction when
Yeah.
certain tools are favored by one. They're like, hey, did you see my message on this thing? And you're like, no, because I don't look at that thing, right? The other thing that we see is, formal versus informal communication, right? Different generations might be a little more informal on some communication methods, or don't see the value of formality, or maybe older generations don't see the value of informality, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that balance between being formal and informal. I think also another one to think about is speed of communication, right? So
Yeah.
different generations might be, it's funny, I just had somebody start at the company. I always give this advice. The speed at which you respond to someone at the beginning of your time at a company is what they're going to expect for the rest of time. And when you start somewhere, you're not very busy. So you're maybe a little faster to respond. But I think also this is a generational thing too, where some people are just totally plugged into their devices all the time. Well, guess what?
Yeah.
I turn all my notifications off on things.
Yep.
So maybe my communication speed is going to be a little different. Is it because I'm older? Is it because I'm maybe more mature to say, hey, I'm going to put that away for now? So I think that communication speed's one. And then last but not least, like that face-to-face communication versus digital. Like we
Yeah.
think about technology and all of this communication stuff, but there still is the old fashioned, let's go take a walk or let's grab a coffee, right? So I think there is definitely something there when we talk about face-to-face versus digital as well.
Yeah. For sure. It's really interesting too. I actually have a follow-up question. Is Engage completely remote? What's your office style? Do you have an office?
We do. So we
Okay.
have an office here in Pennsylvania, so
Okay.
northeast suburbs of Philadelphia, and we primarily have that. There's a few of us in this office. We are primarily a distributed. I call it a distributed company because I think of the word remote as there's us and then everybody else,
Yeah.
right? And I never want to think that way about our company because it creates I'm not there, I'm missing out from headquarters. So we've
Right.
created a headquarters location, and the goal is to provide a place for local people to come and work if they want to. But most importantly, provide a place where our team can come and gather And on a consistent basis, we typically try and have teams come together twice a year where they can plan and strategize and meet each other eyeball to eyeball, right? And that was the goal of taking this space last January, actually.
Really cool. That's awesome. Yeah, Roofer's Coffee Shop, we are completely online. We have a couple offices, but we have people spread across the country, so I can totally
Right.
relate to that aspect of it. It's really interesting. So, can you talk a little bit on the different communication methods that are available today and how that has changed from decades ago?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think the obvious statement, right? Technology is ever evolving,
Right.
right? I remember back in the day, it's so funny when I heard we were going to talk about this, I just pictured myself on the corded phone from the kitchen, and the innovation at that time was a long cord.
Yeah.
Right. So I could take the phone out of the kitchen, still connected, but down the steps into another room where I could shut the door and talk to my friends without having everyone listening to what I was saying, because it was only in the kitchen, because there's only one phone in the kitchen. Right.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because when you think about it, like there's that traditional communication of face to face, right? Another traditional was written, right? I actually received a really great follow up. I have it right here on my desk from a
Oh,
conference I was at last week where I met somebody for the first time in person. They sent me a handwritten note, right? So while that seems like maybe a traditional way, it's still a very impactful way
so
to
impactful.
communicate with people, right? And then phone calls. I have a Calendly link, and originally I only put my Zoom on the Calendly link because, like, oh, we're going to meet video face to face, right?
Yeah.
I actually changed it so I have multiple options. One is a 15-minute phone call. Like, just give me a call.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay. We can still talk without being on video.
I like
So
that.
like you have those traditional ones, which maybe some people think are going the way of the dodo bird, but I think they're actually still super relevant, right?
I
And
agree.
then you have those digital ones, email, instant messaging or chat, text messaging. But I also think social media is a communication method today, right? Because one, it's another inbox. I don't know how many inboxes do you think you check a day, right?
At
It's
least
kind of
two,
nuts. Oh my gosh.
maybe
Think about
more.
it. Your text message inbox, your email
Oh,
inbox, your Slack inbox, your Facebook inbox, Twitter direct messages, Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram. Like, it's nuts the amount of inboxes. So I think like those social media platforms are person to person communication, but they're also business to consumer communication as
yeah.
well, right? Video conferencing, right? Before the pandemic, getting on video on Zoom was something that not a lot of people did.
Mm-mm.
Now it seems to be the default of what
Mm-hmm.
people are doing, right? So Zoom, Teams, Google Meet, whatever your thing is. I'm doing a lot more FaceTime calls with people as well,
Interesting.
right? So rather than just a phone call, we'll just jump on FaceTime where I'm going for a walk and I'm FaceTiming with someone.
Yeah.
And then you have, the future, like you have AR, VR,
Oh,
AI,
yeah.
like you have certain ways that you can I went to a session a couple weeks ago. It was fantastic. It was the use of AR AI avatars to do video communication. So basically, I could record a message to a customer, and it can the platform can basically, like a mail merge in an email or a letter. It can mail merge in, hey, Roofer's Coffee Shop, it was great to meet you at Las Vegas, like, and you fill them in, and it's so good because like when I first saw this, I'm like, it's going to be terrible. It's going to be like, hi, Roofer's Coffee Shop,
Yeah.
it was great to see you in Las Vegas, like
Yeah.
this, like, it's not, it's really amazing. So
Whoa.
personally, like you asked me, what are the different communication methods? There's a bazillion different choices that you have. And I think there's a place for everything depending on a lot of different factors.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so true. I didn't even think about when you first said inboxes, I didn't think about text. I didn't think about social media platforms. I just thought about my email and my Teams.
Yep.
And there's so many. No
It's
wonder we're
crazy.
all overwhelmed.
Well, and it's a choice, right?
Right.
You have to really think through of like, where am I going to interact with
Put my
people?
time.
Because if you get multiple perspectives here. Inside the company is one thing,
Yeah.
outside the company is completely different, right?
Hmm. Yeah, totally. So, because there are so many ways to communicate with consumers, with each other now, how do you determine which is best in each situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of factors that come into this.
Yeah.
Number one, what's the purpose? Why am
Right.
I communicating? Right? Is it to inform? Is it to question, to ask? Is it to just connect? Like, I have a habit of when it's someone's birthday, I I'm not perfect at this. So when someone's going to watch it, like, you didn't send me one. But like, one of the things I like to do is record a little video and send it to them in a text message.
That's sweet.
Right. Because it's a little bit more purposeful and a little more personal connection. Right.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing is like understanding when you're communicating, what is the purpose of the communication, and have to be intentional about that. The second piece is the complexity of what you want to say, right? So if it's just a simple informing, a text message might be a perfect way to communicate with someone. If it's educating someone on a topic, well, maybe there's video, or maybe you got to go a little above and beyond on the method that you use to communicate. So that,
Yeah.
purpose of the communication, the complexity of the message. And then I think another factor is the urgency. Like, how
Yeah.
quickly do I need, I don't know, what do you check faster, your text messages or your email?
And teams
Totally,
always.
right? So there's
Hmm.
a hierarchy of where you're going to reach people.
Yep.
People in our company know we have Slack as our, you use Teams, we use Slack. I don't look at Slack all the time.
Yeah.
If you need to get me, you need to send me a text. It's the one, like, that is the number one way to get me is through a text message. So understanding the urgency of the message, also, whether it's internal or to a customer, that can also determine the means by which you communicate.
Right.
Um, Something I'm not sure people really spend a lot of time on is the tone of the communication as well, right? Is it a familiar tone? Is it a questioning tone? I'm a big fan of this guy, Jeremy Miner. He's a sales quote unquote guru. You can take that for what it's worth. But he talks a lot about tonality in sales, right? And and how you communicate with your tone is really important. And then lastly, like, who's your audience? Right? If I'm texting my kids, it's very different than if I'm texting the CEO of a company that I want to do business with,
Yeah.
right? Or sending a communication to them, right? So having real understanding of who your audience is and what they would expect is pretty important.
Yeah. And I think, especially having all these younger generations coming into the workforce and being in the workforce now, some of that mentorship from older generations is really helpful and useful. And also, like, the back and forth between the two
Well, I
is
think the
helpful
other
too.
way is important too, right?
Yeah.
So, like, it's important for people who are an older generation who are maybe a little more stuck in their ways.
Hmm.
It's an assumption, but I think it's a pretty safe one, right? To be open to coaching from the younger generation to
Yeah.
say, hey, it's okay to throw a couple emojis in every once in
Yeah.
a while. Like, some people really like that, right?
Yeah.
Or choose the emojis well, or here's some, it's not just emojis, but it's a simple example of how there's really stuff to learn from one generation to another, whether that's, up, down, or in the middle. There's
Yeah.
there's a lot of different things that we can learn from each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I think something that I have been really appreciating too about kind of the business world as I've been entering it over the last 6 years is it's okay to be fun. You don't have to be so businessy all the time. And I think that's
Yeah.
something that's maybe even happened since the pandemic. More relaxed vibe and feeling like sending gifts in the whole crew chat or something, or you know sharing more personal stories, and just calling someone and being like, hey, I have a quick question, because it'll be the fastest way to reach them, or stuff like that. Being more relaxed has happened, increased since I've joined the business world.
Yeah, I think the other thing to consider when you're looking at that mentorship, whether it's from young people to more experienced or older people, or older people, an older generation to a younger generation, is vulnerability, right? It does take some vulnerability to admit, hey, maybe I'm not 100% great with this,
Yeah.
right? Maybe there are things that I can learn, and being humble enough to say, I'd love your coaching on this, even though it's someone who's 2 years into the workforce and you have 22 years in the workforce. Like, it's totally fine. There's so much that we can learn from each other.
There's so much. And like you said earlier, it's vice versa. Older generations learning from younger generations, but also so the older generation has to have that vulnerability and open-mindedness. The younger generation needs to be a little introspective and say, yeah, maybe I could work on my communication skills, and maybe I do send too many emojis or something like that. So definitely that open communication is important.
Totally.
So this communication challenge extends further than the office, like you mentioned. It's in multiple areas of life. So it affects customers as well. How do we approach having successful communication with our customers?
Yeah, I think it's almost a repeat, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're gonna choose to communicate well within your company, it's the purpose of the communication, it's the complexity of the message, it's understanding the urgency, it's the tone of what you're saying, it's knowing your audience. It's all of those things are equally important as you're communicating outside of your company as they are inside. And as soon as you're practicing one thing inside your company and another thing outside your company, you're actually not practicing the same skills, which are very, very important for your success, right? It's your success internally and building rapport and communicating with your own teammates, but it's those same skills that translate out to the market as well. And if you're hitting your customers up only with email and they're not responding, like we do this within our sales process, right? One of the most golden things we can get for a customer or a prospect is a cell phone number, because we can
Yes.
text them, because we know that texting people, they're going to answer faster, and it's good for everybody, right? We can help them faster. And also our sales team can be more efficient in their process. Not just our sales team, our customer success team, our customer support team, all of them. So like, the communication challenges that are inside the office, it works with the customers as well.
Yeah.
But the key one, I think if I had to pick one that's most important, know who you're talking to, right? If you're talking to someone in a generation that doesn't use text, don't use text. Don't expect them to adapt to you. You have to adapt and have communication methods that are meaningful for them and hit them where they are most likely to feel comfortable in
Totally.
that communication stream.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I mean, I didn't even actually think about text, because a lot of times when a customer isn't responding via email, I just go straight to calling. But maybe it would be
Mm-hmm.
better to shoot them a text first and say, hey, can I chat with you? Or something like that. That's a really good point.
Yeah. Because I mean, let me ask you a question. If your phone rings and you don't know who it
I'm
is,
not answering it.
I think most people are like that these days, right?
Hmm.
With all the robocalls and
I
all that
know.
stuff, like, it's really tough. So versus a text, you can respond and say, because you can give them context, right? We're
Context.
always training our team on. So I'm going to send you a text and be like, hey, Megan, this is Dean from Ingage, been trying to reach you. Let me know when it's a good time to give you a call. And now they have your number. So when you call, they're actually going to answer. Like, it's better for everyone,
Yeah.
right?
I love this conversation. Okay. So, is there a way to establish best practices throughout a company to maintain branding and keep the messaging? You just talked about you work on this with your sales teams, um, to ensure the right communication style is being used in the right circumstance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, branding is a huge thing for us in our company. But I'll start with this. I think creating clear guidelines and processes is really important, right? Um, it's just we use the term at our company is playbooks, right? So if we're doing a specific thing, if it's a customer success sequence, or if it's a sales sequence, or if it's a customer support thing, we have clear guidelines and processes that we call playbooks that are run to accomplish the task that we want. So it's really important to have clear communication to your team on when you're communicating to customers about this, that, and the other thing. Here are the methods that we use. We templatize a lot of things. So we have a lot of email templates and text templates that people can use in order to have clear communication. It also helps us understand what's working and what's not working, right? So if we're standardizing our means that we're using to communicate, text, email, voice, whatever it happens to be, and we're standardizing the things that we say in those communications, we can now A/B test and say, hey, I know I got Megan on the phone more quickly because I did email, text, phone call rather than email, phone call, or whatever the silly example. But
Yeah,
that's the point of having that real consistent playbook.
that's huge.
Absolutely. So the other thing just internally is talking about what we call platform usage guidelines, right? So if you are trying to communicate with your teammates internally, we use Slack, right? So if you just need a quick answer to a question, we use Slack. If it's a piece of information that needs to last longer, it is more of an education piece or training piece, we use a system internally called Notion, right? So it's a wiki, it's a database of stuff.
Okay.
Or maybe you have set rules for email.
Yeah.
So having those usage guidelines, like my thing I said earlier, like you want to get in touch with me in a pinch, you better send me a text, right? Mm-hmm. So those guidelines for people internally also is super important.
Yeah.
It just gives you a way so that people know the most effective ways to communicate.
Yeah.
Both internally and externally.
Yeah. I love what you said about kind of keeping a record on how a customer responds to a certain communication style. Like maybe, like you said, email, text, phone call. If that's the best pipeline, then stick with that pipeline for that customer. Don't switch it up.
That's right.
Someone should be taking notes here. That's good. So you kind of touched on this, but how does Ingage address different communication styles within and without the company? Like you said, Slack, Notion. What if someone, like you said, with text, what if someone keeps trying to get a hold of you on Slack? What do in that instance?
Yeah, I mean, so internally, it's just the constant reminder, right? It's good onboarding, right? So when people join, I onboarded someone this week and we set up all their systems on their computer and we're like, okay, he's like, okay, you just installed like 10 things.
Yeah.
What is the purpose of each of these pieces of software? All right, well, we typically use email for this and we use Slack for this and we use text message. We don't text message each other very much. So that way it becomes the most important one. So it's really those platform usage guidelines of where do I go to find certain information? And I think as you're communicating with customers as well, it's building those best practices around what the expectation is and then holding people accountable to it.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think is important though is if you have a new team member, or if you have somebody on the team who's having great success, what are they doing? Right? Mm-hmm. Ask them, what are they doing that's bringing that success? Like one of the things within our Ingage software platform that we talk about all the time is our analytics for data-driven decision-making, right? And so if your sales team is out there and they're delivering presentations and now you can look at the analytics behind the scenes of what's going well and what's not, or how people are using the content. A lot of people, when they go and deploy these presentations and start looking at the analytics for their team, they have an idea of how they believe someone should be presenting in the home. Like almost everyone who's listening has a sales process and they expect you to go from A to B to C to D, whatever it is, 5 steps, 7 steps, whatever it is. Our software gives people the ability to see how well the presentation is being delivered to the training that they may have been given. But maybe Megan's doing really, really well and is not 100% on the script that she was taught on because she figured out a new way. Using those analytics for that as well is super important. It's not just punitive. It's not just Big Brother.
Right.
It's, wow, Megan's closing at a 5% higher rate than the rest of the team, and she's spending more time on section 3 of the presentation. Let's bring Megan in or have her share some best practice with the team. So like we're talking about communication, but there's also the idea of using technology to support consistency in your environment and reporting back. I mean, almost every platform that people deploy in their tech stack has some kind of analytics in it. So how can you use those analytics to assess the communication that's happening? Are people opening text messages? Are they responding to emails? Are they clicking on links? Like, all of this is there, but if you're not using those analytics, it's kind of like pointless, right? So what we do, so you asked me the question, how do we address it? Not perfectly by any stretch. There's no question that we could do a better job, but we try to look at the analytics within the different platforms we use for communication to understand how effective it's working.
Amazing. Wow. Yeah. And like you said, keeping that process again. What's Megan doing different? Let's document this. That's great. So, how would you suggest a roofing contractor kind of implement some of these processes into their business, um, and maybe can implement starting with Ingage as well?
Yeah. Um, our product aside, the key is don't take on too much. I think
Right.
we talk to a lot of contractors who are in the middle of a big tech, refresh or implementing a
Yeah.
bunch of technology, and um, many times they get overwhelmed because there's so many different things that they could implement, and there's so
Yeah.
many great pieces of technology out there. But the idea that I like to share is prioritize your tech stack. Which of the things are going to have the most impact with the shortest amount of integration time? Get those things up and running, so that way you can get your people enabled on the technology. Because one of the things that people underestimate in the deployment of technology is the adoption piece of it, right? We can all go out and spend tons of money on technology, but if we don't have a plan around the integration, the deployment, and the teaching of how to use it and why it's important to the workflow of the person in your company, that's going to lead to failure.
Yeah.
And none of us want to fail. We're all well intentioned in purchasing these solutions. So I think that piece of it is so important and often overlooked, of how much time is it going to take to really get people to understand and adopt, activate the software in a great way.
Yeah.
And how do you do it from a communication standpoint? You start simple, you start small, right? The bigger your project, I think the more likely it is to not have success.
Yeah.
Right. So if we're going to just this month, we're going to focus on our email, and we're going to look at how well our email is performing. And then next month, maybe we'll add some text messaging to it. So we'll see if texting has the ability, right? I remember back to science in high school, right? You can't change too many variables at once.
Right.
Otherwise you don't know what actually impacted the experiment. Right. So as much as we'd love everyone to take our software, and I'm sure all of our partners would love everyone to just jump in headfirst into all this technology, I think it's important to take a measured approach and really add things layered on to see what's really having an impact in your business.
Yeah. That's great advice. I think that can also be used in your way of communicating as well. Like, if your communication style isn't
Totally.
working with someone, change one thing and see if that works. If it doesn't work, change the next thing. Try a different
I remember
style.
really vividly a conversation with a sales rep one time, and I was like, how, oh, we have this big deal in the pipeline. We think it's going to close. I was like, well, how are you? They're like, they haven't called me back. I was like, well, how many times have you called them? I'm like, well, they're like, well, I haven't really called them, but I've emailed them like 12 times. I'm like, buddy, you can't just email. You need to rely on multiple ways of communicating. Maybe your email is going to spam at this
Yeah.
point. Maybe, how do you know, right? Have
Mm-hmm.
you texted them? Have you called them? Like, have you sent them a letter? I was like, please try something different, right? The definition of insanity is trying the same thing
Yep.
over and over, expecting a different result.
Yep.
And finally, he picked up the phone and called them and sent them a text, and it was amazing how they got back to him, because that customer was more likely to respond to personal connection.
Yep.
They found email to be impersonal. Great. What a learning.
What a learning experience. Exactly. Send a carrier pigeon if you have to.
Whatever. Send them a basket of cookies. I don't know. Something. Get their attention.
It's a great idea. Well, Dean, we blazed through all of these questions. Do you have any other tips or tricks for roofing contractors or anyone out there listening to this that wants to improve their communication skills through technology?
Yeah, I mean, I would say try something new. right? It's the kind of the summary of what I just said
Yep.
is it's okay to try something new. There's tons of great AI stuff out there as well that might help you improve the message or make a very consistent way to automate some of these processes as well. I had a meeting this morning with someone I used to work with a long time ago who just started a company doing AI chat bots for websites. And
Oh,
we were just talking about how something as simple as that can offer a totally improved experience on your website. And that's another communication method, right? Your website is a communication method.
it
How
is.
can you convert more leads that come to your website? And he was talking to me about the AI technology that they're using when people come to websites in order to have a better conversation with them. It's AI, it's a bot, it's not a real person, but they can be trained really, really well to answer the most common questions and potentially get a lead in your funnel, right? I think contractors that I talked to recently, leads are at a premium right now. So any way to get better leads, to communicate with those leads, to educate those leads before they even talk to your team, maybe there's some AI technology that can be used as well.
Yeah. Dean, thank you so much. This has been so informative and really fun. So thank you for chatting with me. And I hope to see you again on another roofing road trip.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having us on.
Absolutely. For everyone out there listening, you can go to rooferscoffeeshop.com to the Ingage directory to learn more. And we'll see you next time on the next roofing road trip. If you've enjoyed the ride, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join us on every roofing adventure. Make sure to visit rooferscoffeeshop.com to learn more. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next roofing road trip.